The Gideon Omega is an RMR footprint red dot optic that aims to be a budget-friendly alternative to other large windowed optics like the Trijicon SRO. In fact, because of its affordable price, it's often referenced on Reddit as being the SRO we have at home. Let's talk about all the good things about the optic first. The optic has a huge window, and that's the main draw of the optic in general. With a 27mm wide lens and measuring 22.3mm tall, it is large enough that it is comparable to rifle-mounted red dot optics. It definitely is a huge lens, and it's only surpassed in size by my experience by the more expensive Bushnell RXM-300, which I've reviewed in another video. The glass on this optic is crystal clear, some of the best glass clarity I've seen on any red dot optic from any brand, budget or not. The optic has a few different reticle options, red or green emitters with either a 3 MOA or a 45 MOA circle with a 3 MOA dot. I ended up going with the green emitter, 3 MOA dot surrounded by a 45 MOA circle. The optic comes out of box with a 1913 Picatinny riser with RMR footprint, which allows you to mount the optic to rifles, which is where I think the optic is ultimately going to land for me personally, but more on that later. The optic does have a shake-awake feature. It will shut off after about 225 seconds of inactivity and jump right back in with any motion in a few milliseconds. I did test this and it was seamless in my testing. This is a rare feature on budget optics. There is a trade-off with the shake-awake on my model. The optic shuts off after 12 hours of inactivity to ensure a very long battery life, as in the optic won't turn on again if you shake it after 12 hours until you press a button. I did speak with Gideon about this point, and it turned out that this issue only affects a single batch of optics. I'll discuss that more in the review. The optic is really lightweight, but also really sturdy. It's made with 7075 T6 aluminum and weighs in at only 1 ounce. The optic is also listed as being IPX7 waterproof. And if all that wasn't enough, Gideon optics are backed with a lifetime warranty. They will replace the optic for any reason except for intentional damage. Notably, the Omega has tactile 1 MOA adjustment turrets. This is rare on budget optics, so more kudos to Gideon for that. The optic features 10 brightness settings, 8 daytime settings, and 2 night vision compatible settings. The battery compartment is located at the top of the optic, so you won't need to dismount the optic to replace the battery. I can't yet speak to durability quite yet. Initial reports from Reddit users, as far as I can tell, have been positive. I only have 1 range trip on this optic with it mounted on a pistol at the time of the review, so my round count on the optic is exactly 100 rounds of 9mm. It held 0 just fine on the first trip, and I'll update in the comments if I have any issues longer term. Because of the reticle, which I'll talk about later in the video, I am moving this optic to a 300 blackout rifle as a backup sight on that rifle, so I will have some experience running this on 2 platforms. Let's get to the best part now, which is price. The Gideon Omega MSRP's for $269.99, but at the time of the writing of this article, it was on sale on Gideon's website for $229.99. Furthermore, it can be frequently found online on the r/gundeals subreddit for even cheaper. At these low price points, the Gideon Omega is a really intriguing option. The optic isn't perfect, however, so let's talk about the cons. The cons I have with this optic are really nitpicky, especially at the optic's budget price. They don't affect my recommendation of this optic, and I would actually say this is definitely the red dot to go with if you're going with a range build, just because of all the pros. For the turrets, I will say that they are functional and tactile, but the detent in them is a little weak. At an indoor range, I definitely could not hear the clicks given all of the other noise, so adjusting by feel was a little difficult too, as the feedback while turning the detent is not very strong. It's also important to note that the flat blade profile is very thin. It is not compatible with a hollow sun adjustment tool, but was compatible with the included key and the Bushnell tool that I have. In a pinch, the tip of the pocket knife would be fine as well. Again, super minor gripe on the turrets. As I alluded to earlier, the shake-awake shuts off after 12 hours of inactivity, so you'll have to reactivate it with a button press. This is a minor gripe, as it can make the optic problematic for concealed carry contexts if you aren't used to turning the optic on from storage. If you conceal carry this optic, you'll have to press the button after pulling it out of your gun safe, as part of your process every time you holster. It is possible that you might forget this step if you're in a hurry. Again, this can be completely eliminated if you make it a part of your process to check your dot before holstering daily, which honestly is a good practice that you should be in the habit of doing anyway, so like I said, very minor gripe. Gideon explained that this was built into the LED hardware made by a third-party supplier. They have since updated the design in future releases of the optic, so it only affects this particular batch of Omega optics. Gideon has great customer service, and if a customer is concerned about the 12-hour shutoff, you can contact Gideon and they'll arrange a replacement. The last con that I have noticed is that the optic by default is centered elevation and windage wise from the factory, but can only be adjusted 45 MOA in any direction. This is about the equivalent of a max adjustment of just over 5 inches at 12.5 yards. What I found was that out of box, the reticle was adjusted pretty high up versus my point of impact. I walked the dot in, shooting it from a resting position. The turrets definitely work, and I was able to get it dialed in. However, for an absolute co-witness, I was at the maximum adjustment setting, and this was on a pistol that has an extremely low height over bore. I was running this on a Bushnell's optic with RMR cut, which has recoil lugs and is cut to be as low as possible. This is what I love about Bushnell's slides. They cut them maximally deep to just above the extractor, allowing you to co-witness with low irons. But what that means is that if you mount this on something with a higher height over bore, like a shallower direct cut slide or even a plate system, I'm not sure that you'd be able to achieve an absolute co-witness. Now, this isn't a problem if you're a fan of suppressor height backup sights, which is by far the most popular. Something I've been doing lately, although I haven't done it yet on this build, is replace the sights with the lowest possible profile to maximize my window. So blacked out Dawson precision sights have become a staple on most of my guns, or running low profile red dots like the Holosun EPS with standard height factory sights on a direct slide mill. This allows me to co-witness my red dot exactly with point of impact without irons obscuring my sight picture. The irons truly become backups, and it is much like running no irons at all for dynamic shooting. Although most of you run suppressor height sights and adjust the dot to be intentionally above your point of impact. If that's the case, it won't be a problem for you. Again, this is a minor gripe, as I technically was able to get the optic to co-witness with point of impact, but with other typical slides, this might not have been possible with a 10-yard zero. Okay, so that's it for the cons, guys. They're very nitpicky. Now, this is not a con. I would classify this as personal preference, but I don't really like the circle dot running on a pistol. The reticle is noisy for close-range pistol shooting, and for that purpose, I should have just picked up a regular red dot model. But for rifles, this reticle makes a lot of sense. I was going to run this in a match that I have later this month, but I decided against it as I found a use case where I think this optic will really shine. I was interested in the green dot model primarily because I wanted to see if it would work well with my astigmatism. In my experience in a different review video, the Siley Wolf 2 worked great with my astigmatism, and I had that mounted as a backup on my AR-10. That is true of this optic as well. It's great for my astigmatism, which made me realize this would be a perfect backup option for a different AR-based build. In another video, I've reviewed the Holosun 507C. Holosun optics have a 32 MOA circle. Even on the Holosun optics, I generally found myself turning off the outer circle because it obscures close targets. At 45 MOA, the circle on this optic is larger. That made it difficult to shoot precision shots with my pistol. For similar reasons, I don't like large dot at 6 MOA optics. My preference is 2 to 3 MOA generally, but if you think about it, the 45 MOA is perfect for rifle builds. At 45 MOA correlates to nearly 4 feet at 100 yards. Therefore, that can be used to roughly gauge distance on a rifle or pistol caliber carbine. So, as I said earlier, I think this optic makes a lot of sense as a fast close-range solution on an LPVO equipped rifle. Overall, I really like this optic. This particular optic was provided to me by Gideon for free for this review, but I will most likely pick up another one at my own expense with just the regular dot for my pistol. I definitely think it's a contender if you're on a budget, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this pistol for range use. If you're looking for a heavy duty usage optic, you will probably want to spend a little more money than this. However, for civilian contexts, and that is where Gideon is really trying to corner the market, this is a great option and definitely a contender to consider. I want to make one last note about Gideon Optics, and that is the branding. Gideon is a company that is open about their faith, and here at Crackshot TV, we have to really commend that. I wanted to separate that out from the merits of the optic itself, but in an era when there's pressure to remain silent, Gideon puts their belief front and center unapologetically. I want to take this last minute to remind you about who Gideon was from the Bible, and I think that's deeply encouraging. Judges 6:12 says, "When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, 'The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.'" And then further in Judges 6:15, this is Gideon's response to that. "And he said to him, 'Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house.'" Gideon is a reminder to us, as Paul clarifies in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 1:27. "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong." And the reason I bring that up is this: the 2A community often gets this wrong. If you are a Christian, your battle is not of this world. It is to slam back the gates of hell through the spreading of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I do appreciate this about companies like Gideon Optics, that they're so open about their faith for that reason. Let's do it in our own lives as well.